Today we're gonna compare the GoPro Hero 10 against the Sony A7S III. Can the GoPro replace a DSLR? Can it be your everyday camera? That's what I'm curious about, so let's find out. Now the first thing to talk about, of course, is the pricing. The GoPro Hero 10 with its accessories package comes in at about $399 as of making this video, with a 1-year subscription to GoPro, while the Sony A7S III, just the camera body, comes in at $3,500, and then based on whatever lens that you get, it could potentially cost that much more. As we move forward with the different comparison tests, I will be using the December firmware updates on the GoPro Hero 10, primarily the 5.3K frame rates, because that's what I would use with the GoPro on an everyday basis. And when it comes to the Sony A7S III, I will be using the Tamron 17 to 28mm lens with a high f-stop, because that's just gonna get the same look or closest look to the GoPro. Were you able to tell from the footage which one was the GoPro and which one was the S3? Because the one on the left is the GoPro 5.3K 24 FPS, and the one on the right is the Sony A7S III 4K 24 FPS. Like I mentioned before, we're going to be using the 5.3K because we have that option, so why not? And in my opinion, I was kind of surprised how well it holds up extremely well, the GoPro, to the Sony A7S III. However, I still think the Sony A7S III is a bit more visually pleasing to the eye, but it's pretty slight. It's pretty slight, and it's definitely something a filmmaker or someone who's very used to camera looks would notice. Moving on to the slow motion test, where you'll actually see me do some breakdancing in quite some time. I'm surprised I can even still do any of that. But the GoPro Hero 10 is gonna offer you that 4K 120 FPS with 2.7K 240 FPS, which is just hyper slow motion. And the Sony A7S III is going to offer you that same 4K 120 FPS but 2K 240 FPS. The results, in my opinion, are kind of the same as the B-roll footage. The GoPro holds up extremely well next to the S3. Still kind of surprises me, but the S3 just has that visual texture that feels a bit better to my eyes. I couldn't do the 240 FPS on the Sony A7S III, unfortunately, because I don't have the super expensive memory cards that allow you to access that function. So we're gonna compare the 240 FPS on the GoPro to the 120 FPS on the Sony A7S III, but the results are gonna be the same, I'd imagine. What do you think so far? Do you like the GoPro footage better? Do you like the S3 footage better? Do you think it's the same? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's move on to the vlogging test. This is what you use the GoPro most for. Honestly, the best thing about the GoPro vlogging setup is that it's insanely light, whereas the Sony A7S III setup, it's gonna weigh on your arms. So you can tell from the footage that the GoPro stabilization, the hyper smooth, has virtually no shakiness. For vloggers, that's a godsend. Whereas the Sony A7S III, it has its active stabilization on, but you still get a little bit of jitteriness. Now we're gonna test the audio too. With the Sony A7S III, we're gonna be using the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, because that's how you would actually vlog with it. Whereas with the GoPro, we're not gonna do any of that microphone stuff. We're gonna compare the raw audio against that. So I just did a lap around the pool to show you guys the stabilization on this GoPro. It's kind of insane. I imagine it's gonna blow the Sony A7S III out of the water, literally, because it's right there. But let's see how the S3 does on the other end. Just did a lap around the pool with the S3, and the weight of the vlogging setup here is already weighing on my arm a little bit, and I can tell that the stabilization, even though the active stabilization on this camera is on, is a little bit shaky. So GoPro probably did blow it out of the water. This one came out as expected. The GoPro Hero 10's raw audio wasn't as good as the Sony A7S III with the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, but I do think that the GoPro's raw audio was very decent. It's very usable. I would consider, though, still investing in a microphone for the GoPro Hero 10 for the best audio, because I like good sound. I like the best sound. The last test that we're going to conduct is the low light test. and we're gonna use my room, my YouTube setup for it because it is a low light scenario. You can see that the GoPro Hero 10 and the Sony A7S III are set up across the room from me, and it should be pretty obvious that the S3 outclasses the GoPro Hero 10. The GoPro Hero 10 just seems to try to compensate a lot more when it doesn't have enough light. But I still think that the GoPro Hero 10 is very usable. I just would shy away from low light situations with it. My final assessment is that the GoPro can definitely replace the DSLR to a certain extent. The GoPro definitely holds its own. It's a beast, at least the Hero 10. But the reason I say only to a certain extent is because I still would trust my Sony A7S III in any situation, whereas the GoPro Hero 10, there are certain things where I feel that it's unreliable. That being said, I would still recommend the GoPro Hero 10 to a new filmmaker, to a YouTuber that's trying to do vlogging and that kind of thing, because it will do everything that you want it to do. Now, if you find yourself interested in the GoPro Hero 10, I'll leave a video for you right here and right here. One is the unboxing first impressions and the other are the use cases of this camera. Other than that, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe because you know I'd love to have you on this creative journey, and I will see you next week.